Coming up on this episode of 3 In, 3 Out, as we await the big news on OC, DC, we don't know nothing yet. So we're going to look at some big, bold predictions heading into the 2024 season, plus one thing we got right about the 2023 season, and one thing we got really, really wrong. Stick around for this special off-season 3 In, 3 Out, part of the Seahawkers Podcast Network. Welcome into a 3 In, 3 Out off-season Seahawks Spectacular. I'm your host, Clinton Bonner. This is, of course, part of the Seahawkers Podcast Network, and I am joined by the Montana Seahawker, Mr. Adam Emmerich. Adam, we don't have an OC yet. We don't have a DC yet, but we still got Seahawks content that we want to bring to the flock. How you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. Just fired up after that new intro there, Mr. Video Man. That was impressive. A lot of fun. Hopefully these OC and DC hires that we have coming up here will be impressive as well. But some of the periphery things that they've been doing in terms of hiring a staff have been cool and things that I agree with and like to see. And we'll see how it moves forward here. But initial reports or initial returns for Mr. Macdonald, they're looking good so far. So fired up about that.
Me too. Very fired up about that. We are going to take you through a little off-season exercise today. We're going to call it, it is 3 In, 3 Out. So of course we got to go with the numerology. We got three things. We're going to call it one thing we got right, one thing we got wrong, and one way too early bold prediction for 2024. Before we get there, if you're watching this on YouTube, you see a new frame also. It says grow the Hawker and subscribe, youtube.com/Seahawkers podcast. Of course, all the audio platforms, Spotify, Apple, wherever you got ears, it's out there as well. The best thing you could do is subscribe, tell 1212s, and if you like it so much, getintheflock.com so you can get the perks. Join us in the Discord, join us in the Facebook Ring of Honor. We're doing mailbags, not bags. Hit that bell button, and this way you also know when we're going live. We got a lot of content to cover this offseason. It's already picked way up. And by the way, Adam, and to everybody else, Brandon is basically getting into draft season. So he's going to have some guests on the Seahawkers pod that you know and love, I think, coming up very, very soon as Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, as we head into this juicy draft season also.
100%. We got tons to talk about in terms of this entire offseason going forward. It's going to be exciting. But you had a couple things that we wanted to do today. The three things, like you said, what we got right from this last season, what we got wrong. I found that to be much easier to find things. And then one bold prediction for next year. So Clinton, let's get this up since this was kind of your baby.
Thanks.
Why don't you do a little victory lap, have a little glow? What did you get right about last year going into the season?
Yeah, so one little Cadillac trot for the baseball fans out there. That's that old game that Adam loves so much. The Cadillac trot around the bases,
I think
of
the
course.
Egyptians played it, right?
Yes, the hieroglyphs prove that out, and then some. Probably aliens, most likely, from the looks of it. It's an odd game, so clearly alien informed. So the one big thing that I think I really nailed, and I know that you think there might be some variance in this one. However, I was out in front with saying, hey, I think we're a 10-7 team. I missed that by one. That's not what I'm saying I got right. My reasoning was, I was like, this upcoming schedule is really difficult, extremely difficult. And to look back, now that we get the chance to look back at it, we played the Lions. We played a full strength Bengals. We played the Niners twice, of course, the Rams, who ended up being pretty darn good. We could talk about them a bit. They'll be good next year too. Played the Browns, played the Ravens, played the Cowboys, played the Eagles. Okay, they were on the descent. Played the Steelers when we couldn't stop, a paper bag from running on us. But to me, it was predictable, Adam, that this would be almost nearly a miracle if we were pitching 11, 12 wins. I thought the schedule was really difficult. And I think it also leads into some conversation about the 2024 opponents. And can we look at it at this point and say, easier, less than easy, and figure that out from there. But that's my number one. I know that you're not a huge fan of looking this far ahead at opponents and schedule. However, I think I got this one right, man. What do you say?
You did. And even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. Look, at the end of the day, man, now is the time to go back and look at strength of schedule and try to figure out like what that was and what it meant for the team and all that. And it absolutely lined up with your prediction, and you should be proud of that. And
Oh,
look, if
thanks.
you can do it 2 years in a row, because once a coincidence, twice is a trend. And then if you get me 3 years in a row, I'll start to buy into this. We can start looking at this stuff, the off season prior to the season starting. But at this point, it feels more, I don't know, a little lucky than not lucky to get that one right. But
Yeah.
I'm not trying to take away from your credit here. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you. We'll get to your first one in a second, but I think we're really just describing here is that Dave Bloomy barometer where he puts the tinfoil hat on, and it's like, hey, if we could pass that barometer for accuracy, then I think we're on to something because Bloomy likes to dive into some theories as well, especially the travel and off day theories that he's been a big proponent of, and we will have Bloomy back on in this upcoming offseason to go through the fantasy football year before that gets kicking and going. All right, so Adam, your turn. One big thing that you predicted before the season, what'd you get right?
The thing that I predicted before the season, the Seahawks did not invest enough via the draft and free agency to help the run defense. It was
Mm-hmm.
the number one thing I harped on. I was made fun of by a lot of people, especially after the draft, when I was really upset that they didn't spend really any of their first 2 round picks on interior players. I mean, I guess you can count Derek Hall, but again, he plays the edge of the interior defensive line. So and it showed up. And it was probably the demise of Pete Carroll. It was the reason why this team underachieved this year by our standards and by the standards of the owner and John Schneider and probably Pete himself. And it was maybe the most infuriating thing to watch last offseason and then throughout the entire season. And I hated being right about it. I really wanted to be wrong, but gosh darn it, they just didn't do it. I have a feeling this year is going to be drastically different in that perspective.
Yeah, you are. Unfortunately, you did nail this one. Draymond Jones, even earlier, like, well, I've been, I remember you saying, I watched the tape. I don't really see it in the run game. And then he did not really produce as a pass rusher, not the way we thought he might. Jaron Reed was really nice surprise to the upside overall. Outperformed what we thought we might be getting back from him. Kind of got the best out of him again, which is really cool. He had a very solid year. Leo, when he came over, played really well. Great trade as long as we could sign him forward. With that, though, when the draft happened, the one I was looking at the most was still like, for me, like I like Zach Charbonnet, but I don't know if I love Zach Charbonnet. And it's not a Zach Charbonnet thing. It's just that spending a fairly high pick when you've got a glaring need. And this is a thing where you can fill in the blank later. We see the NFL do it all the time. And we had just gotten K9 the year before. And I think it was Keanu Benton who went a couple of picks before Charbonnet did, and there was lots of rumors that was our dude, and we kind of got sniped. Okay, but that to me was one of the pivotal moments of like, well, man, we really could have looked at that interior, and then later we take Kenny McIntosh in the 7th anyway. Doesn't end up seeing a snap or a touch this year, and yet there were dudes and UDFA's and 6th and 7th rounders, 5th rounders that end up having really solid year. So kind of a miss across the board, dude. I wish you were right, but I also hope and think with Macdonald in an understanding of that, as Schneider said in the game, he goes, look, there was 2 times in the Seahawks history. One was in 2010 and one was against the Ravens, where he's like, we will never look like that again. All
Yeah.
right. Well, that was a pretty big statement, right? So now with Macdonald, I would have to think Schneider and Macdonald would be like, we will never look like that again. And I hope that's the case, dude.
It ought to be. And the weird thing is even though they didn't put enough resources towards that part of the team, at least in my opinion, they really still underperformed from there. Like they should have been better. They really should have been, but it just didn't really work out that way. Like you said, Jaron Reed, he was a nice pickup. It was nice bringing Leo in later in the year. Now we'll see if they can keep him. I really hope they do, because he was he was the best interior defensive lineman that we had. You mentioned the Draymond signing. I was like, dude, this guy doesn't play the run at all. He's more of a interior pass rusher, and those guys can be hit or miss too. I didn't love that signing. And then you see a bunch of interior defensive players that were taken either around or after some of the Seahawks early draft picks when they had those first 2 round draft picks there. You
Yep.
gotta look at the Charbonnet pick, and I'm like, I'm not mad at that one because you have to run the rock, you have to stop the run. To me, it was the JSN pick, and yeah, I almost said for my right that he would not be the big difference maker in the Seahawks offense that everybody seemed to think. And I mean, he did have one game winner that was nice, I guess, but um, I would have rather seen them trade out of that pick and then pick up more D linemen later or whatever it is. I feel like you can get those receivers pretty much any year in the mid first round pretty friggin' easy.
There are a lot of them. There's a lot of them coming out of college each and every year. And obviously you see Tank Dell and Josh Downs and Rashee Rice. There were quite a bit, right? And that's not naming them all by any means. I think also there, player 19 was Kalijah Kancey, who we got to see a good amount of in the postseason there. That again was a dude who was rumored like, oh, if he's there, we might pounce on Kalijah Kancey. He's gone one pick before. So I do wonder between those two players, between Benton and Kancey, did we get double sniped? Because Schneider talked about that too. He's like, well, the board did not fall the way that we wanted it to. And then we end up taking best player available. And we may talk about JSN a bit more here today, but let's rotate over. But I do think you're right. And I know you're right. I hope we do turn that around. It's absolutely paramount. Let's turn it around ourselves. Now we're going to go to one thing that we just were flat out wrong about. So why don't you take the lead on this one? What's the biggest thing you could look back and look in the mirror, look at the flock and say, when I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong.
Oh, let me count the ways. I could probably give you at least 4 or 5 and kind of going through them. I listened back to our season prediction show and hey, you said the big one. So I was going to go with a different one because it wasn't quite as obvious, but you said the big one. I was all in on the big dime, 3 safeties, Jamal Adams, Julian Love, and Diggs being a powerhouse in the defensive backfield, in Jamal being able to help in the run game and be a difference maker there. And it fell flat on its face. It didn't work in any way, shape, or form. And I couldn't have been more dead ass wrong.
Fine. I'm gonna definitely send you a lifeline on that one in the sense that sure. What kind of caveat or asterisk do we need to put on there for like a healthy Jamal? Because I know he played. I don't know that he should have been playing for that long. It just looked like he definitely had lost a step or still battling back from what was just an absolutely brutal injury. So I will extend that lifeline to you and say, man, you might have been wrong about it, but do you think that reason alone, injury, was a big factor?
It didn't help, but with that said, I could give you another one too that I was just as wrong about. Colby Parkinson's going to have a breakout year. I was just dead certain that he was going to have a huge year. He had one play that looked like what I had envisioned in my mind, the game winner he caught in the end zone. And that was it.
Yeah, I do remember the play. The tight end room was interesting. And then one of the things that in the very last week when Noah Fant got hurt, for me, there was this fairly evident addition by subtraction. And I was a big Fant supporter. Like I like this guy. I think he can be a difference maker. And you were like, this is not my wrong, by the way, but you were like, all right, but I talked to and watched a bunch of Denver football, and it's maybe he just ain't it. And we'll see how free agency treats him because there was, to me, concentration things with Fant or some drops or just some lack of being a really good blocker. And then when he was out, and then it was like, oh, let's refeature Uncle Will again. Lo and behold, Uncle Will's doing his thing. He's plodding along as he is right now. Whatever, really still solid in the run game and soft enough hands, knows how to sit in zones, gets open. Good yak for a bigger dude. Good yak with Uncle Will. I was like, oh man. I was just like, for me, a big what if was, what if Noah Fant got hurt earlier and it was more a Will Dissly show? I think we would have benefited. It was my conclusion. Not a huge sample size, and you never know how it would go. So some definite late season bias for me on that one. But it'll be interesting as we go into this cycle with like Uncle Will is paid way too much money right now, like way too much money. So will they cut him and resign him? Will they just renegotiate? We'll see what happens with Parkinson. Fant is going to walk, we imagine for sure. And do we draft a tight end? There's lots there to uncover still, but a good topic nonetheless, dude. All right, my big one, my big miss. You said it earlier, and I'm going to own it. My big thing, and I have reasons to still love it, but I was full in on JSN unlocks the Seahawks offense. And that's how I described it. I think we did a video on that, like the one move to unlock this. For several years, I wanted that, like the Buffalo Bills always seem to have that third dude. That this year was Shakir, and he showed up big in a couple of games down the stretch. That dude's a baller, by the way. Really good player. And before that, who was the super scat back guy that I loved on the Bills? Really short guy. I forget his name. It's escaping me at this point. But I was convinced that we needed the third weapon, specifically on the wide receiving, to get into the 11 personnel. And then with Waldron and McVay lineage, magic. It would unlock things. I think JSN had a really good year. I think stats wise for a third receiver where the top two dogs stayed healthy, I've got some things to talk about in a second that I'd love to get back to, just to go through some of those stats as he compared to some other teams that had like three deep essentially. How did he do against those types of environments? But his two big dogs in front of him stayed healthy. He was pretty good as a rookie, stats wise and just impact wise. And yet I got to own it. This did not unlock the Seattle Seahawks, Adam. Now, why? I don't know. Do you have thoughts on why this thing didn't magically make us a 30-point per game team?
Well, a couple different things. The problem with this offense for the last couple of years has never been that they just need to be able to have another target so they can throw the ball freaking more. That's just not the problem. They need to run the freaking rock more. Like that has been the biggest problem for this offense. If you want to unlock the offense, unlock your running backs and have some good offensive linemen in front of him. Perimeter players, especially slot receivers, there's a couple that are game changers, and we've seen them over the course of NFL history and that sort of thing. But to be honest, for the most part, it's not a position that totally unlocks or changes an offense on the regular. Never has under a Pete Carroll team. That's for sure. They just don't use slot receivers that way. And then also the idea of getting into 11 personnel more. I was like, no. Get me more 12 personnel. Get the tight ends on the field, or give me two back sets, or whatever it is. Like, get heavier, get more physical. And you said, okay, the stats look fine. Fine. If you want to count all those bubbles, great. You said the impact was, significant. I don't see it. I don't think that he even had more touchdown catches than Marquise Goodwin last year or the year prior. I thought his impact was marginal at best. He dropped enough third down balls that were critical that made me kind of be like, everybody told me this guy catches everything and was so sure-handed, and it just didn't prove out that way. And I don't know, man. I didn't love the pick. I hated the way it was implemented, and it took touches away from the tight ends and the running backs, and I think that's why it ultimately failed.
I think you are right. The thing for me is I do not look at JSN as a dude who's in the slot for his whole career. That's not what he is.
Sure.
I think he's the heir apparent to Lockett. And yes, he'll play some slot because he's shifty and he could really win on the outside. He'll, as he did against the Eagles to win that game that time. And I think that'll prove out. I think he's still going to have I would still put chips on the dude's going to have a well above average career, potentially a great career. We shall see what happens with that from an impact perspective. I did go back, so 63 receptions, 628 yards. Okay, that's fine. And 4 touchdowns. I think it's a Marquise had 4, maybe he had 5, but regardless.
Okay, maybe they tied. Yep.
Yeah, that's fine. But I started to look at teams that are like 3 deep, like 3 legitimate receiving weapons. So you go through like okay, well, who are we talking about here? Everybody will first go to the Bengals. So Tyler Boyd, who is their legit 3, 67 receptions, 666 yards, 2 touchdowns. But that was also in a huge vacuum of T. Higgins missing a lot of games and Jamar Chase kind of being dinged as well. And then, of course, their quarterback was, sideways half the year, except for when we played them, they were full strength, as mentioned earlier. The other one, too, is the Cowboys, where like Brandon Cooks is their clear 3. Ferguson was there too. And then CeeDee Lamb is just another planet, like 181 targets, like insanity. And like a Brandon Cooks, 54 receptions, 657 yards. He scored 8 touchdowns. He was a red zone target. Dak fell in love with him around the red zone, and he's Brandon Cooks, dude savvy. So then there's others that are out there, but I wanted to kind of at least pull in 2 that are like, all right. And I think and Brandon Cooks in other parts of his career has been a 2 and has even been a 1. And on the other side of it, there's been lots of like, hey, Tyler Boyd could be, but I look at JSN. I think he's more skilled than both of those dudes. I think he has more potential than both of those guys. And if you had to say which one does he pitch more towards, he's more towards Brandon Cooks, in my opinion, from a skill set. And that's pretty good. That's a pretty good NFL player. So I just want to bring those 2 to the table and see what you thought.
I've never been a Brandon Cooks guy. He's okay. He's fine. He's a league average receiver. I mean, how many guys can you go? I'm dead serious, man. Go back and go through the stats. How many dudes can you find with a 50 to 65 reception stat line? I bet you it's maybe 2 dozen or at least a dozen.
For sure. Per year.
I'm just saying that guy is everywhere. That guy is everywhere.
I'm saying Brandon Cooks in his top years, which I'm just Googling right now just to be like,
he was at best of 2. He's at best of 2.
Where are we?
And Tyler Boyd, again, another meh guy. Like, fine. He's just another dude. He happens to play in an offense that features that position a little bit more. And again, you said the circumstances this year kind of lended to him having a bit more. Can you imagine if they would have taken that draft capital? Let's say they didn't even go with defense and had put it into the offensive line. You know how much better we'd be with 2 legitimate top threats on the outside and a badass offensive line that you could run behind and protect Geno really well? That had done so much more than JSN. Now, I was mad about the pick because of what it meant for this last year. And it proved out to be what it was. The people that want to make the argument, about him being Tyler's replacement and all that going down the line, fine. I guess that's fine. But again, you can get that receiver in the first round any given year. There's 3 or 4 of them every single year. So for what we needed and how hard it is to come up with legitimate trench players, like to spend it on the perimeter on a 3rd wide receiver, black. I still hate it.
All right. I'm definitely long-term still very bullish on JSN. So we'll continue that one into 2024 and maybe beyond. I think we're going to look back at that and be like, that's a heck of a pick. Cause if we end up with the next Tyler Lockett, right? And it's like, okay, well, look, if you had spent the 20th pick overall at any point, any year, doesn't really matter. And you're like, hey, I know there's no guarantees in life, but this thought experiment, if it's like, hey, we're going to get you the next Tyler Lockett, what does that mean? 8 years of 1A receiving and our super clutch player. It's going to cost you a 20th overall pick. I think you just say, sure. Like any of one of those years, yep, absolutely. Get me that next Tyler Lockett. I think it's a pretty easy decision. I realize that's a pretty big leap, but I really do believe that's the type of talent he pitches towards and could actually exceed it. So that's where I'm at. And maybe that leap is a little too much for this experiment for you.
Tyler Lockett was a 2nd round pick.
I know.
Okay. No, I'm just saying, like,
I totally know.
But that's
what I'm saying. But it doesn't matter where we selected Lockett. It's like, what did we get out of Lockett? So if we think we got the next one, well, man, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And I
hope
think
he is.
So this, yeah, of course, this will be a cool one to watch as the years roll on and we're still doing more and more Seahawks podcast content because we ain't going nowhere. I do want to say before we get to our big bold way too early predictions for the year, Brandon Cooks. I do want to check in on that, right? So 5 years of over 78 receptions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 years over 1,000 yards. Okay,
Mhm.
he had 90 receptions, 81, 80, 78, 84. Dude, 8 touchdowns, 5, 7, 8, 9, 6, 6. He's better than average, man. Brandon Cooks is
Have you ever put Brandon Cooks in your top 15 receivers in the league?
in any given year, absolutely. Absolutely. In any like the 2018 Rams, like looking at that one, 80 receptions, 1,200 yards, right? 2016, his third year, 78 receptions, almost 1,200 yards with the Saints. He was top 15 those years,
Not a
without a
winner,
doubt.
not a difference maker. Never have been in on the guy. I just think
Uh,
you can rattle off all the stats you want at me, man, and or anybody else who's a Brandon Cooks fan, but let me know when he actually is a guy who is a difference maker on a championship caliber team, and then I will get back to you. But
Well, I mean, the Rams were a championship caliber team in 2018, right?
no,
Was
they
that one of the
weren't.
years? When did they
No, they
go?
weren't. They didn't win it. They're not a championship caliber team.
Championship caliber. They got to the the dance. All right, we differ on our JSN projection, and we definitely differ on what we think Brandon Cooks has been as a
I'm not
consummate
saying he's
professional.
bad.
No,
I'm
I
not
got
saying
you.
he's bad.
I'm
I
saying
just
he's been a good NFL wide receiver, like a good one. And somebody look back and be like, all right, yeah, every team he's been on, dude's been good. He scored 8 touchdowns last year, 8 more touchdowns. Yes, they threw the ball over the field, but again, I'm in on JSN. All right, that was fun. We do have our big bold prediction for way too early prediction for 2024. This is back to me. I'm going to lay this out here. It does parlay into some of my JSN stuff. My look at this is pretty simple. I might be wrong. I'm not even sure. I hope I'm wrong because I'm looking at what does it mean for the team and are we better or are we worse with money considered? Look, Tyler Lockett is owed almost $27 million. $27 million next year. A post June, I think it's June 1, cut saves 17 million in cap savings. From what I could see from over the cap, people could tell me I'm right or wrong, but I went to over the cap. I'm like, okay, pre-June, post-June, click it. $17 million back to spend. And I could start running things. Okay, we go get a stud guard. And Adam, I'm with you, dude. Pour the money into the offensive line, right? But overall, 27 million, it's way too much money to spend on Tyler Lockett. Maybe there's other ways out of this, but spending 27 million on Lockett this year, I don't see it happening. So my big bold prediction is something dramatic happens there. And if I have to just call it as a bold one, I don't think he's on this team in 2024. That's my bold prediction. What do you say?
that'd be sad, but for the reason you mentioned earlier about drafting JSN and then you got a dude on a rookie deal and maybe can step into Tyler Lockett's shoes.
And Bobo, don't forget more
And
Bobo.
sure, and then you have Bobo as well. We'll see if the production when he's used in a sparing basis continues when you get him more reps and touches and there's more film and guys
Of
figure
course,
out how to play his style of receiver and all of that. But
his style of awesome and open.
dude,
Always.
I'm not trying to bag on Bobo here. I
I know.
love
I
me
know.
some Bobo. It's just it's always hard when somebody flashes just a bit
Yeah.
to be like, yep, for sure you can plug him in and he's going to be
And
a
you
guy
don't know.
that can
Yeah.
duplicate that or amplify that when his usage is also amplified. So we'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see. But in
For
terms of the
sure.
money with Tyler, you're not wrong, dude. Like that's just too much money for your number 2 guy. And at the end of the day, Tyler Lockett was definitely one of Pete's dudes in
Mm.
as far as the culture goes and everything like that. I think if Pete was around, I think that this prediction would be really wrong really quickly. But the thing is that Pete's not around, and we don't know what Mike's going to do when it comes to some of the offensive players or how John's feeling about things. And you do technically have a replacement of sorts with JSN. So I don't know that he's not going to be on the team, but it could be a massive restructure. That's for sure.
It'll be interesting to watch. I am the piece that I keep going back to is for me, it's like you might have a replacement with JSN. I don't think we don't. It's like if we get the volume to JSN that Lockett got this year, I
Yeah.
realize you want to see it and you'll see, and you'll believe it when you see it. I get that. I am like, I have seen enough. And I didn't love some of the drops, bubble screen drops. Like, what are we doing? Like, we got to catch those. There was enough of the magic moments and enough of the stuff where he's starting to get open underneath on third downs over the middle in clutch situations. And there was enough of that I'm like, oh, if he's featured, if he's not the third dude in that progression with a crap offensive line that we got to pray Geno can get to that third dude. If we fix that a bit and he's the second guy, or in some cases the one guy, because it's not going to always be DK. I think it's there, man. And I know we're going back and forth on this whole episode about that, and we shall see. But yeah, man, 27 million. It's a spicy meatball. I'm not sure McDonald and Schneider are just going to take it and say, well, that's the best we could do there. I think there's going to be some change, and we'll see what it is. All right. How about you, though? What is your big, bold, way too early 2024 prediction?
Well, gonna get away from the passing game and all of that stuff, because this prediction is also rooted in something that needs to happen, and I believe it will. I think that K9 and Zach Charbonnet will combine for over 2,000 rushing yards next year.
I'm dancing to that one.
I think that Mike and John are going to pay better attention to the trenches. I think that Mike Macdonald obviously comes from the Harbaugh school of thought when it comes to playing football. When they all run the rock, it's one of the foundational pieces of the way that style of football is played, and that's the culture that Mike comes from. We don't have the OC yet, so it's hard to know for sure exactly what the offense is going to look like. I mean, even after they're hired, you're going to be guessing to a degree, but you'd have a better sense of things. But there's no possible way that Mike in new OC underutilizes our running backs the way that they have been the last 2 years with Pete and Shane.
Well, I guess there's no possible way that the 2017 Baltimore Ravens could have handed the ball off 8 times to non-Lamar touches in the AFC Championship game when it was working and had worked all year. And I realize that's not a Mike Macdonald thing. I get that. I realize that they have an OC who's got to go and answer to that call in Baltimore. And I hope you're right. I think you're going to be right. And the thing is, Lamar Jackson is one of one. You can say what you want about others, and Justin Fields could be this. Lamar's one of one. He's the only dude who could do the things he does in the NFL. And okay, cool. They plan or Josh Allen, but they plan a lot of runs around those dudes. All right. Well, they're not going to do that with Geno. I'm still like in the big time camp of it's going to be Geno. Geno's a very good NFL quarterback and a first year rookie coach. It's like, yeah, give me the known entity. That's cool. Free square, total free square with Geno. Great place to build from, but he's not going to run him too much, a couple times a game, maybe, non-scramble. Right. So it's got to go somewhere. I'm with you. And what does that mean? Yeah. Those touches going to K9, going to Charbonnet. I think that's delightful. If we're near that, if that's the 1,300 yard, 800 yard, hopefully it's 13 and 11. Man, we're going to win so many freaking ball games. We'll win so many games and keep our defense fresh and just have time of possession. It is such a tried and true formula on how to win in the NFL. So I love that. I hope that comes true. All right. So Adam, there was really no news. Yeah. Jay Harbaugh is our special teams coach. Cool. He's been good at everything he's coached so far, and no OC news, no DC news, but we were able to run through some fun thought experiments on these big, bold, and too early predictions. What do you want to leave the folks with? What can they be doing that's the right thing for any flocker out there to do so they're right and not wrong?
Well, it's pretty simple, and it's easy to be right because we're giving you the answers to the test here, man. Hit like, hit subscribe, share it with your friends, spread the word, spread the love. We're not going to do nothing but continue to ramp this show up as we move forward here, and your support to this point has been awesome, and we're going to do our best to earn all those things. But if you feel like we are, get it done, man. Like, subscribe, hit it.
Yeah, hit all the buttons. We are fired up. It's only early February, right? But it is draft season. It's going to be awesome. We're going to have EJ Snyder from Bootleg Football on with Brandon. We're going to have all sorts of guests on, and then we start to tinker and get ready for April and figure out What are we going to do with that 16th overall pick? And then are we going to make moves to get back into the second round? We got multiple third round picks. Are we going to go trench heavy? What's going to happen in free agency? And as we reshape this team in someone's new image with Mike Macdonald. So, dude, I'm fired up about it. And I think with that,
there's only one thing left to say.
go Hawks.
Go Hawks.